I'll just give it. I think people are still filtering in, but that's fine. We can make a start as we're a few minutes behind anyway. As you all know, this morning we'll be talking about supporting a just energy transition. This is actually one of our longest show and tell sessions, which I think speaks to the importance of this topic. It's great to see that so many projects have been focusing on this, and it will be a continued theme throughout the SIF. As well as achieving environmental sustainability, supporting a just energy transition is key for social and economic sustainability. We all know that affording energy bills currently is a challenge for many across the country, and low carbon tech at the moment is generally more expensive, which creates additional risk for vulnerable and marginalized communities. It's important that we embed not just equality, but equity of provision as we transition to net zero. Supporting a just energy transition is also really important, as it is key to leveraging public buy-in, which we cannot achieve a smooth energy transition without. We've already seen examples in the news of where public outcry has blocked big demonstration projects that have been planned for a long time. And finally, on the logistical vein, supporting a just energy transition creates opportunities for those who are highly skilled in other sectors that we won't necessarily expect to see in a net zero energy system. A just energy transition means that they can bring that valuable experience into the net zero sectors that we will be making more use of. And it also ensures that the regions that they work in, many of which are already in lower social economic areas, don't get left behind, even though they have been the ones fueling our country for many years. Next slide, please, Amy. Okay, so that was my welcome. I'm Serene Esiroso, as you can see there. I am an innovation lead working on the Strategic Innovation Fund, which is jointly delivered by Ofgem and Innovate UK. And I'll talk a bit more about the fund now. Next slide, please. Thank you. So as we deliver SIF, or rather why we came up with a SIF, it was to achieve the following two key visions in order to support the three purpose categories that we've got below. The whole point is so that we can ensure a smooth, effective, and rapid transition to net zero, whilst ensuring that the people, the planet, and economic opportunities are not hindered, but rather they have the opportunity to grow. You may be familiar with the Network Innovation Competition, or NIC, which previously followed NIA. SIF was designed to replace NIC so that we could support network innovation more rapidly and effectively, and help those innovations come through as business as usual. Next slide, please. So the Strategic Innovation Fund is paid by consumers. Part of the money that goes to Ofgem then is funneled into the SIF. So as a result, that is why topics such as ensuring a just energy transition are key, because consumers are paying for this. It's important that all consumers can benefit from the SIF. So we've got just under £500 million available over the next 5 years. And this competition, I'm so sorry, clearly my brain hasn't switched on. This competition was designed to help both network users and consumers. So yeah, it's a new type of innovation process. You may be familiar with the rounds that we do. You probably are if you're on this webinar. And also the different stages from discovery to alpha and then beta. The reason that we do this is so that we can ensure the best innovation is developed and being pushed through at the right times in the right way. Next slide, please. So I'll just talk about the agenda for this morning. Next slide, please, Amy. Thank you. So we've got 5 projects that we'll be presenting, and we'll do 3 followed by a brief break. Each of the projects has 25 minutes to present, so 15 minutes for the actual presentation, followed by a 10-minute Q&A. So please make sure that you pop any questions that you have into the Q&A function at the bottom so that we can just dive straight into any questions at the end of the presentation. Yes, so I will hand over to the High Fair team and stop talking now.
Yeah, shall I kick off then?
That would be great, thank you.
Thank you very much. So next slide, please. Yeah, hello everyone, and welcome to our SIF Alpha Phase Show and Tell presentation. We're really pleased to share the progress we have made in developing the Fairer Warmth Hub and our impact to date, as well as our future plans. Next slide, please, Amy. Okay, as for agenda, firstly, we will be discussing the challenge and aims of our project, our progress with the Fairer Warmth Hub so far, a specific use case in Fife, and what's next for our project before opening up to questions. Next slide, please. Yeah, as I say, first of all, we'll discuss the challenge, aims, and our solution concept. Next slide, please. Okay, the challenge we've been addressing has evolved over the discovery and alpha phases of our project. However, what has remained clear from our research and evidence gathered through extensive consumer engagement is that the perspectives of different demographic groups and businesses differ, and people require tailored consideration and support through all phases of a net zero transition. And diving deeper into the challenges through end user panel sessions and research, we identified that consumer information is often inaccessible and top-down projects can meet resistance. These issues compound together, making the energy transition less accessible for those most in need of support. Next slide, please. The Fairer Warmth Hub aims to align and connect stakeholders, ensuring that everyone works together effectively. This involves providing tools that help individuals and communities understand and apply the best solutions for their situations. Next slide, please. Yes, as you can see, Fairer Warmth is helping provide the tools and solutions that will enable the planning organisations to work with the participants in an energy transition. Next slide, please. As you can see here, we're all part of a collective mission to embrace cleaner, greener energy in our homes, workplaces, and communities. However, navigating the shift to sustainable energy is complex and requires connections to be made between individuals, families, communities, and organisations of all types and size. Next slide, please. The Fairer Warmth Hub facilitates a just energy transition by providing a standardised, inclusive approach with the necessary tools and support network, therefore enabling those involved in planning and coordinating the energy transition to support those in need, whilst enabling participants to share information, their priorities, and data to help with planning. The Fairer Warmth Hub can help by offering a solution for people and organisations to work together to secure a clean, fair, and sustainable energy transition. Next slide, please. Okay, now we'll run through the work carried out to date in the alpha phase and some of the tools and approaches that we have developed. Next slide, please. Okay, so our alpha project incorporated 6 work packages, including the hub development itself, tools development, engagement and service design, developing the operating model for the process and system, data gathering and analysis, and future trial design. We'll now run through each one of these in turn. Next slide, please. The Fairer Warmth Hub itself is the central website where each community participant can access the tools which will come onto appropriate to their needs. In work package 1, we focused on gathering requirements from end users and developing the initial structure and content for the hub, ensuring it aligns with stakeholder needs. And that included engagement with individuals, small businesses, and wider participants and project partners. Next slide, please. And then on to tools development. So in work package 2, the team worked collaboratively and with wider community partners also outside of the project consortium to make significant progress in developing the key tools for energy transition participants. Some of the tools that form the Fairer Warmth Hub include the Fairer Warmth app, which can be used by individuals by entering some simple information about their property and capabilities. This system subsequently connects those individuals with the support required to make energy efficiency improvements, including local grants available and providing opportunities to participate in local energy transition projects based on their postcode. An image in the top left there of the app. And as not all consumers want or can use apps, the Champions app, which is used by advisors and support workers to engage more vulnerable energy consumers in energy transition projects. This part or version is complemented by an e-learning training platform that empowers advisors with the knowledge and tools needed for effective community consultation and to enable them to become effective community champions. The filming in the top right there. And then the analysis and data platform collates all the information provided by consumers and champions to help planners, including networks and local authorities, to better engage and understand their needs. It also has a specialist area that pulls data from a variety of sources to better understand building energy needs, aligned with network connectivity and capacity. Finally, further tools were shortlisted specific for future development for participants not currently provided for, such as schools and small businesses. Next slide, where I'll hand over to Tom.
Hi there, thanks Andy. So for the Catapult's role in this, we did a human-centered design approach to defining and developing some of the tools. So that consisted of conducting a bit of an evidence review. There's obviously a lot of research in this space already, looking at the barriers communities face when they move away from fossil fuels. We did some research, some interviews with sort of consumers, vulnerable consumers, sort of smaller businesses, local authorities, landlords, that type of thing. And we used these to develop some design requirements to build a prototype of the hub itself. And we went through an iterative process of testing these tools with different user groups to understand where needs were met and where needs were unmet. And we used that to advance the design of the hub. And from our engagement, we produced essentially a rapid review, kind of calling out a bit of a wish list, I suppose, of all the things that we think the tool could support people with, where they need support. Some kind of wireframes, which is essentially your blueprint of what the tool we think should look like, including things like what the architecture, how everything should link together, and a detailed kind of usability report at the end, which is essentially the findings from testing the thing for real and calling out opportunities for the tool to meet its full potential, basically. That's me.
Yeah, next slide, and on to Alice.
Thanks, Andy. Morning, everyone. So LCP Delta's work looked at the long-term commercialisation plan and operating model for the Fairer Warmth Hub. So focusing on what happens after beta, so how it operates and how it is funded. And as part of that, we did a CBA looking out until 2035. We looked at what roles and skills would need to be delivered, would need to be part of the delivery of the Fairer Warmth Hub, so web developers, community engagement, and things like marketing as well, and identified the key roles that would need to be recruited as part of a sort of early stage and early part of the next stage of the project. We also identified options for funding, so the Fairer Warmth Hub to achieve what it wants to do will offer the most benefits to consumers, and particularly vulnerable consumers, if it's free at the point of use. So we need to look at alternative funding models other than consumers directly paying for the use of the Fairer Warmth Hub. To do this, we looked at the value proposition for a range of potential funders, including networks, energy suppliers, local authorities, community groups, and large corporations, and found there's strong value propositions for each. For networks, we looked at the modelling, which is in some of these graphs, and found that there's good financial returns and payback times of 2 to 6 years, based on all the benefits the hub can offer, and that's assuming they would bear all the costs. And we don't think that would be the case, as you mentioned. There's a lot of parties that could benefit from the Fairer Warmth Hub, and we looked at the 2 models for the 2 scenarios, broad reach and narrow reach scenarios, which is the 2 graphs on the bottom left, and found that even in the narrow reach, and showing quite moderate percentage gains and all the benefits that we looked at, the costs of the benefits of the hub far exceeded the costs. So it could offer a lot of different benefits to all those parties and consumers themselves. Yeah, I can pass back to you, Andy.
Yeah, next slide, please. Okay, just got time, but yeah, work package 5, we focused on integrating data flows and ensuring security and compliance, which are critical for the hub's success, including development of security statements and a GDPR compliant privacy policy to enable data sharing across all participants. Next slide, please. And finally, we began designing the future of the Fairer Warmth Hub, which included engagement with communities across Great Britain relating to future trials and establishing a pathway to rolling out at scale, which we'll come on to in a moment. Next slide, please. Okay, yeah, and next we'll just go through a case study showing how the Fairer Warmth Hub could be used. Next slide, please. During the project, we conducted a detailed case study for how the Fairer Warmth Hub and tools would be used in West Weems, which is a coastal community in Fife. The illustration on the slide shows how planners, such as energy networks and local government, could use the data platform and sharing capabilities to support local plans. Meanwhile, on the right-hand side, shows how the Fairer Warmth app and champion systems can better help enable community input and participation. In the next phase, we hope to demonstrate how this will work in practice and can lead to a smoother decarbonisation process. Next slide, please. Yes, finally, what's next for the project? Next slide, please. As we move forward, one of the key focuses will be on building a dedicated team to drive the Fairer Warmth Hub, consisting of specialists in community engagement, network planning, and small business support, as well as maintaining and developing the digital tools. Next slide, please. And whilst we've successfully developed some of the core tools, as outlined here, to help individuals and planners, such as the items on the screen at the moment. Next slide, please. Yeah, we'll also be developing new tools for participants who currently are underserved by the hub, including schools, small businesses, and social and private rented sectors. We shall also be developing physical Fairer Warmth hubs to enhance community participation and provide drop-in centres that helps with localised implementation of our strategies. Next slide, please. Yes, and in beta, we plan to scale the approach by conducting 10 local demonstrator projects, some of which are listed on the right-hand side, as well as establishing the physical Fairer Warmth hubs in 3 or 4 locations and aiming for widespread adoption throughout the project. In summary, through the beta phase of our Fairer Warmth Hub project, we want to demonstrate and embed capabilities within communities to pool efforts, share knowledge, and support one another to overcome challenges and ensure that everyone, regardless of their starting point, is an integral part of the just energy transition. Next slide, please. Yeah, and just finally wanted to thank all the project partners part of this project and stakeholders, as well as wider community members and community groups who have, and funders who have supported the Fairer Warmth Hub project to date. And yeah, really looking forward to working with everyone moving forward. So thank you very much. Next slide, please, which is just handing over to questions.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, iFair team. It's really great to hear about such impactful project. So let me just open up the Q&A. I can see that we haven't got any questions at the moment. So audience, please feel free to put them in. But I actually have a couple that we can perhaps start off with. So it was great to hear how much you engaged with consumers, because as we all know, this can often be quite a challenging task, despite the fact that it is so key to what we do. What was your approach to tackling that? How did you manage to get such great consumer interaction?
Yeah, I'll answer a bit first and then maybe hand over to Tom. So in the discovery phase, we ran some panel sessions, including with a consumer impact panel, which consists of a number of people who specifically have been identified as potential having challenges or being vulnerable in the context of the energy transition, to run past different concepts and gather their input, as well as working with wider stakeholders, including small businesses, to gather their initial input. And then during the alpha phase, I'll perhaps let Tom talk about that in a bit more detail.
Yeah, so we have a couple of panels at the Catapult that we can use. So we've got the Living Lab and the Home Truths panel for consumers, and we can, I'm sure you're all well versed, define our kind of criteria and recruit that way. So we certainly targeted specific types of vulnerability, I suppose. You know, we were looking at people who who their health might be impacted if they were living in an underheated home was one group we were keen to ensure that they were included. We were looking at sort of people with young children over a certain age as well, people who had electronic issues, maybe people who had communication issues or English wasn't their native language, that sort of thing. In terms of, we also were fortunate enough that Centrica allowed us access, they've got a panel of SMEs as well for the business side of things. So we're able to kind of similar approach, who would we like to speak to, assess some requirements and recruit them there. And then of course, through the partners as well, we wanted to engage with, I guess, people in Fife to some extent, because they've gone through this for real. So it's very much at the forefront of their mind. So we thought we'd be valuable to try and get some people from that area, and sort of local authorities, social housing providers, third sector. I think we had landlords. Yeah, there's a whole kind of range of people who we feel could represent a user group for the platform in the future, just to kind of get a sense of where their pain points are and where the tool could feasibly help overcome that or mitigate it in some way.
Oh, that's great. It's great to hear how you made use of existing systems and groups to get the most out of that research. I can see that there's a question in the chat from Joe Wheeler, who is from UKGBC, and UKGBC is planning to work with the MCS Charitable Foundation to engage with 3 to 5 places this year on facilitating and funding a home retrofit. Oh, and she's just wanting to know who she can reach out to. So perhaps you could type an answer in the chat. And then if anyone has any other questions, please feel free to drop them in. I have another question in the meantime. So as soon as you were talking about the app, my immediate thought was, but not everyone can use apps, and those are already quite vulnerable customers. So I think the champions approach is a great one. I was just curious about how you'll identify and engage champions. So will they be, for example, people who already work with those vulnerable consumers, such as carers or social workers, or is there another approach that you're planning to use?
Yes. So the Fair Warmth Hub team would be a central hub team, but the tools are really for the people involved in local energy transitions. So yeah, it will be through working with local community groups, through local authorities who have their own support teams, also through the energy networks and their customer services teams who might be supporting people along the way. So yeah, there would tend to be an organisation on the ground who is trusted by the local community And then the champion system and the e-learning platform, which has been designed specifically for people who just have an interest in sustainability and supporting their communities to upskill to the point where they can help with energy transition projects in their community. So there would always be a trusted local organisation on the ground actually helping with the interface, and they would be the organisers of the energy champions or advisors.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. And one more very quick question. What will be the function of the physical hubs once you get, assuming you get through to the beta phase?
Yeah, no, we had a bit of feedback from some of the communities that we were working with to say that a lot of people don't understand the technologies that will be impacting them either in their homes or the street works and causing all this disruption to people. So that, yeah, the physical Fairer Warmth Hub or drop-in centres will be places in central parts of the communities, hopefully existing places, and not an entirely new concept, but and where people can go in, actually speak to people and see the different types of technologies. So yeah, we might have different types of insulation in there, heat pumps, they wouldn't be everywhere because they would be expensive to set up unless there was a lot of funding available. But yeah, we want to see how useful they are in supplementing this sort of the advisory and the part of the project and the toolkit.
I would love to visit one of these hubs, so fingers crossed for beta.
Oh yeah, we'll let you know.
Thanks so much, High Fair team. And we'll now move on to Vivid.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Is Frank on the call?
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me?
Perfect. Yes.
Sort of, but rather confusingly, I seem to have come up with Simon O'Loughlin rather than. So I'm Frank Clifton. I'm the Innovation Manager at Scottish and Southern Electricity Networks Distribution. Pleased to be here to talk about our vulnerability identification via informative data project, or VIVID, as we know it for short. If you can move on to the next slide, please. We'll just run through what the project's about. If you can move on, please. And I'll just go through some just quick introduction, run over the project statement and how VIVID has been specifically designed to overcome them. A key part of the project was how we break down the very siloed data we have in a secure and compliant way to create this bigger pool of information, which we can then utilise to try and identify vulnerable people in the communities. And then a brief discussion on what we are planning to do next, and then I'll hand over to the team and they can go through the deal. Can you move on, please, to the next slide? So as well as myself, on as you can see for the slide, we've got a very large team working on this. We have a massive range of expertise in consumer vulnerability, data protection, data analytics, and customer service. Not everyone's going to talk, so we'll have Katie from Quarriers, Martin from Aberdeen City, Fiona from CGI, and first of all, Simon O'Loughlin from my team, who is the project manager looking after Vivid, and also Rick Curtis for the DCC will fill you in the rest of the project. So over to you, Simon.
Magic. Thanks very much indeed, Frank. And if we could have the next slide, please, because it contains the problem statements in effect, which reads a little bit like the list that Serena had at the top of the call, for everything from lack of coordination between data sharing and collaboration between third sector, energy industry, and local authorities. There's untapped smart meter benefits that Rick in particular and Fiona will come on to a little bit later on, making sure that we're not leaving anyone behind. That recurrent theme, particularly in digital exclusion, noted a question for the High Fair team around the apps, making sure that we are bringing everybody with us, not just not leaving them behind. Important differential there, and making sure that we can bring everyone and get them into the advantages that time of use tariffs, flexibility, smart metering, and making sure that we are looking after the most vulnerable in society, the people who very often slip through the safety nets that are off radar, and we want to make sure that there's no gaps and that we're picking up on people that need help and support. They're perfectly entitled to it and they're not getting it at the moment. And if you click on the next button, please, that should bring up all of the things that we are doing about that, and this is what we'll cover in this presentation. Those of you who are on the end of Discovery and the beginning of Alpha, you will note that these still hold true. Every bit of this has been proven to be valuable within the Vivid project, and it is they're all things that are continuing into we've been doing in Alpha and will hopefully continue into Beta. Next slide, please. So I tried to do a what is it on one slide, and in essence what Frank said, there's a lot of data silos across Great Britain that all try and help people out of vulnerable situations, and breaking down those silos to create one bigger yet compliant, safe, secure data pool is going to be absolutely critical. I'm getting a bit of feedback in the background, but
I need to work, and I also need to record this thing which I'm speaking.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so we've got those first 4 ticks, the people who are working on it currently. So bringing in third sector, local authorities, councils, smart meter data system data, and of course DNOs. And then if in Beta we can bring in other areas, GDNs, energy suppliers, telecom, water, financial institutions even, all of it is up for grabs and all of it is up for discussion. Really could be big. And we've got the greater benefits, as we said on the previous slide, finding the missing vulnerable, making sure everyone can access the help. Quicker, more accurate emergency response is something that's come out in Alpha that we can add to the deliverables and the benefits. So really, really big things that we can do with Vivid. Next slide, please. And the next one, sorry. So where have we got to on this journey? Well, Vivid is the people we've got on, as Frank alluded to at the top, they're absolutely the right team to be doing this. Everyone's been sharing the visions, everyone's focused on the outcomes, very customer-centric team that we've got, and making sure that we've got from a DNO-led approach, but it's novel in the way that it's bringing everybody else from the consortium into the data sharing, and then how we will get the results out for customers, local authorities, DNOs, third sector, and other sectors if possible. And as you'll see on the coming slides, we have made a really great start, and Fiona's going to talk you through some of the impressive work that have been done at CGI and DCC.
Thanks, Simon. If we go to next slide, please. So I think it's safe to say that Vivid has tried to build on a lot of the previous innovation that's gone forward, looking to give additional assistance to those in need and analyze smart meter data to do so. But I think the change with Vivid is that we've tried to address some of the recurring issues of data sharing, data privacy head on, and we've tried to take a different approach here. So we take a new approach with sharing data between the stakeholders here. So basically no sensitive personal data ever leaves a data controller. We've looked at new ways of doing that so we can effectively share and remain GDPR compliant. We've also looked at the use of disaggregated smart meter data, creating a dedicated vulnerability analytics service so that the smart meter data never leaves that service, so it's securely stored in there. So we've looked at approaching different ways of keeping the data secure so we can address these problems head on, because they are things that have recurred repeatedly as people have tried to use this information to do vulnerability assistance services. And we believe we've successfully devised the means to do that. And not only that, we believe that the approach that we've taken is very replicable across the GB sphere, and also secure in the way that we can replicate that across GB. So we're quite excited about the approach that we've taken and how we can move forward on this. So if we move to the next slide, I'll try and talk a little bit more about some of the work we've done and how that might actually work. So one of the ways that we don't share sensitive data between all of the stakeholders in a particular area, where we're trying to create a complete view of existing vulnerability data, is that we've looked at an innovative approach to scoring data. So as you can see here, across the partners in the Vivid project, what we've done is we've looked at all the information that each partner holds about their clients, their carers, their tenants, their customers, and we've looked at what that information means, and we've given a consistent scoring approach to that data in each partner. We're then able to combine all of that data together to give scores in key areas around resilience or health, financial and location information, and we're able to combine that into an overall score. And the numbers here are just a kind of sample of how that scoring works. And so what this gives us is a very consistent way of assessing customers in a geographic area. In this case, we're testing Aberdeen City, and we're looking at the customers there. So we've got this very consistent method of combining all the partners in Aberdeen City's information together, giving it a score, and having a very consistent way of approaching triaging and offering services to those people. And I think one key thing to highlight here is, as probably a first in a SIF project, we've included DCC system data here. So that's information about the top-ups, the emergency credit, etc., that people have entered into in their smart meters as part of the scoring. And I'll hand over to Rick to talk a little bit more about that side of things.
Thanks, Fiona. So yeah, as we've heard from both Simon and Fiona, a really key data input and novel innovation in the project is the addition of those smart metering data sets to help with the fuel poverty identification process. This is building on a number of DCC initiatives that we've been looking at to harness the power of smart meters for social good. Could we move to the next slide, please? I think we're on that next one. Thank you. So, as Fiona's alluded to, working with CGI and partners, we've developed that way to integrate both consumption data, but for the first time in a network innovation project, smart metering system data into Vivid scoring methodology and analysis. Really key to this has been identifying a compliant route to identifying smart metering data at its most granular level, in order to maximize the insights from the data, but critically always carefully respecting people's privacy and consent, and of course staying in step with all regulatory and data privacy obligations. Given the presence of smart meters across the whole of the UK, the fact that the data is dynamic rather than static, which many PSR datasets are, and the fact the network's already been paid for by consumers means that smart meter data is huge value as an input into PSR and vulnerability assistance services. So yeah, I'd really echo Fiona's comments earlier on that as a project team, we're excited and confident we found a way to leverage this unique national data set into the project. And ultimately, that will help support a cost-effective, standardized vulnerability assistance service across GB. Over to you for the next slide. Thank you.
Thanks. So I'll just very quickly go through some of the results that we got from some of the small trials that we were able to run as part of Alpha. And on the screen, you can see a couple of examples of our scoring results where we've matched the data together between different stakeholders in Aberdeen City who provide services to vulnerable customers. And also you can see the DCC system data scores coming in there as well. So this is a real example of this data being pulled together, scores being given, and in this case, we were able to go to our quarriers, who are our charity partner, who know the actual customers involved quite well. So we're able to go back and check these scores, and they are accurately reflecting the level of vulnerability for each of these individuals. So we've got a fairly good baseline that says this scoring is approximately correct. But I think probably the key thing is that we've got a viable baseline, and there's a lot of scope to develop this further and make it much more sophisticated, but also include some sophisticated governance on how this works moving through beta. So we think there's a lot of scope to improve this approach, make it more flexible, and make it more reflective of the individuals without revealing any of their sensitive personal data across a particular locality. So this gives us the basis to share this information across multiple parties who need to provide services, including in civil contingency issues when there is a sudden emergency and we need a broad range of stakeholders to step in this level of information is really good for that sort of triage, and we're very excited to look at how we might move that forward during a beta phase. If we can move to the next slide as well, please. So one of the other things that we wanted to do was look at how we improve the priority services register information, because there is missing data. Obviously in priority services register, it can become out of date. And obviously with the use of smart meter data, the use of other stakeholders' data, we can look at how this information should be evolving if there are people missing from the priority services register. And some of our early results, we obviously, while we're matching this data, we can quite easily see, and you can see from some of the null columns there, that we're finding people who exist, for example, in Quarrior's database or in Aberdeen's vulnerable tenants database, but are missing from the priority services register. So we've also proven a means to go into a specific locality, run this analysis, we get our scoring information, but we also start to see who's missing from the priority services register, who's missing from the local authority vulnerability register, pull that data together and sort of start to populate everyone's reference information, so that we're not missing those in need. We're bringing more people in to get the assistance that we want. And we feel that this is a repeatable and scalable approach that we can take to move forward. And just to reassure everyone, the people that we found in the trial have been signed up to the priority services register. So those that we found were missing are all there now. So that's step one of what we hope is a big improvement in priority services register moving forward. So I think hand back to Simon now.
Yeah, if we could have the next slide on, please, that'd be great. Lovely, thank you. So yeah, once we've identified, as Fiona was saying, Fiona did a good job on that one. Once we've identified, we'll be able to get better PSR. Not only that, because we're refining at the same time data that is held by local authorities, the third sector, the targeting of help and support and finding people who are eligible but have missed out so far will allow an incredible social return on investment. Modelling showing that it's about 50 to 1. So for every £1 spent on Vivid, £50 can be saved throughout GBPLC, primarily on health, emergency response, and making sure that we've got the support required for everybody. I'm going to move on to the next slide because of time, and I believe the next slide is Martin. Martin, have you made it on? I know Martin was struggling with his Zoom earlier. No. Katie, do you want to take this slide and the next slide? Are you able to do that, or do you want me to cover the lean one?
I could probably wrap up both. I'm going to jump to the next slide though, since that's the Quarrior's one. Thank you. So I think our Quarrior's voice and Aberdeen City Council voice is that of the perceived vulnerable. The data has been absolutely amazing in terms of what we've found out in this section of the project, but we can only get good data if the people that it impacts want to be involved. So that sort of stakeholder engagement has been really, really important to us. We are very much of the opinion that we don't do things for people, we do things with people. So Quarrior's point of view, it's all about lived experience, bringing people that are going to be impacted, affected by this project need to be around the table, and they need to have their voices heard. And I think that's why this project has been so well received so far. We had some great engagement sessions in Aberdeen. People really wanted to be part of it. They can see the change, and we can see from the data that we've learned, and that there's a real future in what we can do with this, which is extremely exciting. And I think there's long-term input from the people that we've already engaged with who are very keen to continue to help us with this and really use their lived experience to make sure what we come up with actually is what is needed by the people who use it most. Just in terms of time, I can wrap up there if we want to move on, Simon.
Thank you very much indeed, Katie. And if we go on to the next slides, just put in the chat, I can do these in 60 seconds. So the next slide, please. It is the next steps. What are we going to do from here? And as everyone said, it's exciting times to be able to do this. So we'll build on what we've done in Aberdeen already, completing the data modelling, delivering practical help and support, that emergency prioritization model, and we'll also be evaluating the and engaging with people who've been offered help and accepted or rejected help to find out why they accepted, why they rejected, and how we can make it better iteratively. And on the next slide, the next step that we've got there is rolling it out, making it scalable. We've identified 5 new local authorities, 2 of which we will tackle first, where there's, as you can see in those bottom graphs, a lot of people who are eligible for the PSR in that first graph, and the second graph at the bottom, but aren't yet on the PSR. So these are exactly epitomise the people that we need to find and help and support. And that happens to be Bournemouth Pool Christchurch. UKPN, who've been a valuable partner on Alpha, are engaging with Hackney to be able to bring on a more urban area into this. And as we go on to the next slide, please, because that illustrates the right-hand side of this better. Here you can see that all of the partners are ready and able to support their various different sectors in the rollout GB-wide, starting with the first 4 or 5 local authorities. And we will follow the iterative cycle on the right-hand side to be able to see which regions would need the help and support most, recruit the new team, sharing best practice, gathering data and producing results, and refining it again. So it improves every month that we do this. And on the next slide, that is just a summary, so I won't take up any more time. It really is going over everything that we are ready to start on beta, and there's great benefits can be had. So we're ready for any questions now, please.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the team. And Simon, I have to say, I'm impressed with how you cantered through those last slides.
Thank you.
Attendees, as I mentioned before, please feel free to drop any questions in the chat. We've got about 5 minutes for the Q&A. Whilst we wait for those to come through, I had a couple of questions. So my first question was, well, first of all, thank you. It was really interesting to hear what you're doing and how you're combining the consumer-centric side of things with the data and digital transition need for the energy system. I was just curious about how your activity will align with other wider activity in the sector, which perhaps is a bit slower and not as successful as what you're doing. So for example, smart meter rollout, which we've been waiting for a very long time now. And obviously the slow deployment of that could potentially present a barrier. How are you planning to mitigate that to ensure that you're still able to get the maximum value from your activities?
Super, thank you. Can I take that one? But Rick, Katie, Frank, feel free to dip in. Yeah, actually, Vivid is a collaboration of 2 SIF pitches. One which came from CGI about how smart meter data and better data can identify vulnerable consumers, and we realised that when we were using smart meter data as the sole premise of ratifying the data that we were going to be analysing, we realised that we had the potential for digital exclusion, that we might be leaving people behind. And Katie and the Quarriers team had put in another SIF discovery bid that was all about reducing digital exclusion and making sure that people could be brought with the energy industry on that journey to smarter and more digital driven decision making. So it was by design that the project has got these 2 original partners on it to make sure that we're using data in a really inclusive way and bringing people with us. Katie, do you want to elaborate on that, because that was your part?
Yeah, I think I can just apologise. I've heard from someone that my sound isn't great, so apologies for that. Hopefully you can hear me okay now. Yeah, I mean, the sort of bringing together of the 2 SIF applications, I think, has been the main benefit. We've also got a project at the moment in digital financial inclusion with the banking sector. So what we've learned from there, we've really been able to bring into this project. And at times, the findings have been quite similar. So I think that's been a real benefit for us.
I would also just very briefly add to that you know, the smart metering rollout has now passed 30 million meters and is improving really, really quickly. So, you know, even today, there's enough data there to be incredibly useful in this, but obviously that's going to be completed in the coming years. And, you know, ultimately this is about the assistance services that could be rolled out in 2, 3, 4 years time at the end of beta nationally. And by that point, I think we'd hope that we'd be, you know, right up there close to complete rollout. So there's enough there to be deriving value from today, but we're going to be, you know, moving more and more value as each year ticks on.
Amazing, thank you all. And then my last question in the last couple of minutes was, obviously you're collecting a phenomenal amount of data, which is fantastic. How are you planning to clean it up and present it? So not only is it accessible to other stakeholders who might want to engage with it and draw conclusions from it, but also it can interact with other systems and potentially other data sets.
Do you want to answer that, Fiona?
Yep, I'll take that one. So basically what we do is we use SSEN's data as more or less the hook, because being a regulated monopoly, they cover a whole geographic area, and we tie all of our data together through their address references and customer references. With our kind of consistent scoring approach across all the stakeholders, it kind of smooths out any irregularities that might be had in kind of the written word about describing somebody's vulnerability or anything like that. So what we're moving towards is a standardized way of representing a customer, their location and their vulnerability. And our view is that by doing that, and that then being replicable across all of GB, you've kind of got a standard reference for a vulnerable customer in a specific locality. So whether you move to sharing that data with, you know, the Red Cross, the fire brigade, you know, whomever, they should all be expecting exactly the same type of data. And the Vivid system, that's essentially its job, is that it will take lots and lots of verbose information and it'll shrink it down to being, where is this person, who are they, what is their indicative vulnerability, and then it's the decision of each stakeholder about how they want to treat that. And there's always a route back to the stakeholders who hold the very detailed information about that customer. So if somebody's concerned about, let's say, a quarriers carer, they can find from the scoring information that that is a vulnerable person. They would like to know more about them. They can approach quarriers to get more detailed information and discuss the specific service that they might need to offer them. But we'll focus on producing a very, very standard and very, very sort of succinct indication of score for that vulnerable customer that will be standard across GB. And that's one of the key remits of Vivid, is to create that standardization and approach to vulnerability information in each locality around GB.
Wow, it's great to hear how much thought has gone into it. I'm really excited to see the outputs and next steps. Thank you, Vivid team. We'll now move on to the Net Zero Terrace project.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. My name is Helen Seagrave and I'm the Community Energy Manager at Electricity Northwest. I should have some slides that are coming up. Thank you very much. I've got colleagues here, Kate Gilmartin from Rosendale Valley Energy and Phil Proctor from Borough Happold, who are here to help answer questions after the presentation. But if we can move on to the first slide, I can set out the problem that it is that we're trying to address. So how do you decarbonise terraced homes where there's no outdoor space for air source heat pumps? This picture shows the back of a row of terrace homes in Bacup in Lancashire, which is where this idea originated, and that illustrates the lack of outdoor space. These homes typically also have front doors that enter straight onto the road, and they're not dissimilar or untypical to terraced homes across the UK. So there are 10 million homes, terraced homes across the UK. About 6 million of them have 2 or 3 beds, and they're probably the ones with little outdoor space to accommodate an air source heat pump. Obviously, the age of these homes also probably means that the ability for them to heat themselves is compounded with low energy efficiency and the need to retrofit. Fuel poverty and affordability may also be an issue for many of these householders as well. Our counterfactual is that without a coordinated approach to providing low carbon heat, that these homeowners would have no choice other than to install an electric boiler at the end of their life of their gas boiler as an individual uncoordinated purchase, and that would potentially lead to larger additional loads on the network, but also be more expensive for the homes to operate. The next slide sets out the solution, the net zero terrace solution, which aims to deliver low carbon energy, healthy warm homes at no upfront cost to consumers. It's a system that combines the physical infrastructure of a shared ambient loop heat cluster powered by in-street boreholes and individual shoebox heat pumps. It includes community-owned PV, and the offer to householders comes with energy efficiency retrofit to ensure that the heat demand of the house matches the output of the heat pumps. Alongside the physical infrastructure is the virtual infrastructure, which is a smart local energy system which is being designed to operate the system to provide optimal heating to the home, but is also key to making the system affordable by using the local community-owned power to help reduce the overall cost to consumers, and being able to offer flexible services to a range of markets and to use the income for that to further reduce the overall cost to consumers. So key to making this affordable to householders and no upfront costs is the smart local energy system to maximise the incomes and the price that the consumers are paying. It's also got an innovative finance model that's looking to raise debt on the infrastructure, at which the householders will pay back over the long term using a standing charge in addition to the cost of the energy that they can use. It is not a microgrid or a private wire, and the whole system is integrated into the DNO network. So our work at the DNO, that is, has concentrated on the connections process and the impact to the network and how to keep the cost of the connection down to help contribute to that overall aim of affordable system, and what range of solutions we can offer to make sure that we can accommodate this solution, which will be applicable to terraced homes anywhere in the UK, to make sure that we can meet the planned sort of scale rollout and pace. This slide shows the partners that have been involved with the project. As I said, it was an idea that originated in Rossendale, and Rossendale Valley Energy are our community energy partner, who came up with the project to try and reach out and tackle decarbonisation to parts of their community that might otherwise get left behind. Rossendale Borough Council are our local authority partner. Borough Happold are providing technical support, who've also been working with the University of Salford and their smart metering lab and all the expertise they've got around energy efficiency and smart meters at the university. Centre for Energy Equality involved and the use of their Fairer Warmth app to engage consumers. We've been working with supply chain partners from Urban Chain and Kenza, and Northern Power Grid and UKPN have been supported from other DNOs. So the next slide talks a little bit more about why we believe this project is different and innovative. So it's a solution for mixed tenure streets. It doesn't matter whether it's homeowners, private rented or housing associations on the street. It's the same offer to all houses, so it can be provided to mixed tenure streets. Like I said, the aim is for no upfront cost to the consumers and to make it affordable, which means that we're aiming to offer it to the homeowners at the same price or less than their current gas bill. And combining that physical and virtual infrastructure together will help overcome the spark gap, and that's the name given to the price between the electricity and the gas price. So obviously moving people onto electric heating, which heat pumps are, could potentially increase their energy bills if we're not mindful about how to get that overall cost down. And the community elements and the ownership of this is key to driving the affordability, because it's a non-profit extractive model that aims to get the income and the price from the community energy and drive it back into the model to keep the overall price down for consumers. And like I said, it's going to be replicable and scalable and can be rolled out to other communities. And the project is working on toolkits to give to other areas that are interested in deploying this model. if you move on to the next slide, it talks about, so from a DNO point of view, what are the benefits from us being involved in this? So it's given us the opportunity to look at new connections and processes to accommodate the Net Zero Terrace smart local energy system onto our network. So like I said, it's not a microgrid or a private wire, it is integrated into our network, and it's one customer coming to us with at least 2 points of connections. And being able to look at that whole project in a round has meant that we've looked at new connections, processes and policies to make sure that when we're receiving multiple applications of this, we've got a standardised approach to dealing with those, and that we can accommodate them onto the network at the pace of rollout that the project team want to achieve. Working with the project team on a planned approach also helps us inform our network forecasts and planning, so it can feed into things like our distribution future energy scenarios, which obviously informs our load-related investment. It's an opportunity to work with somebody that's delivering a coordinated approach, which means that we can coordinate our response to what customers need and what infrastructure upgrades they might need to meet their 2050 targets. So if we've got customers like this going into areas and delivering infrastructure in a coordinated approach, we can do our work in a coordinated way to make sure that all of those customers has everything they need on the network to be able to meet 2050 targets for the Net Zero Terrace solution, but potentially also for other solutions coming down the road. And that has the potential to reduce overall costs for us and also disrupt to customers. And not least, but most importantly, this is a solution that's targeted at vulnerable customers that might otherwise miss out on the advantages of the energy transition. And it's responding to one of our customers and communities' requests for support in a landscape where nobody's really taking the lead on how to get consumers that can't afford upfront costs to take part in the low carbon transition, and where there isn't an obvious decarbonisation solution for their heating. No one's obviously taking part in that space, so it helps us support a community group that is leading the way there. So what have we found during the alpha phase? So during the alpha phase, we've focused on developing the virtual infrastructure, supply chain engagement, the planned approach to the rollout, integrating it into our network, and the community engagement models and the evidence base to support that. And as you can see, we've demonstrated that the Net Zero Terrace solution requires 3 times less demand on the network than the electric boiler counterfactual. The majority of the subsystems are available on the market, but the innovation is bringing them together and bringing that virtual and physical infrastructure together. So the early stage interoperability testing that we've done through Discovery and Alpha shows that that is possible, but we need to do further developments, particularly on the virtual infrastructure, to make sure that we've got the functionality and the components, such as the home energy management system and a new component we're calling a community energy management system, to give the system the functionality that we require to operate in a way that gives that affordability to the customers. The techno-economic model that's been done as part of Alpha does show that it is challenging to meet that affordability criteria, but it does give us the clues as to where the sensitivities in the model are, and therefore what we need to focus on to get that end price for the customers. And as I've said, we can demonstrate that this approach is suitable for Terrace across the UK. Toolkits are being developed, so it's a model that can be picked up and delivered elsewhere, but further work is required sort of from our end to make sure that when we're receiving these applications, we can process the connection applications at Terrace. We have a range of solutions to offer, and we can meet the pace and the scale and the ambition of the customers. So if we move on to the next slide, this is our next steps. So this is partly what we want to do through SIF Beta and partly what the community partner Rosendale Valley Energy are doing as part of the wider project. So under our next steps, like I said, we still need to demonstrate that the Net Zero smart local energy system can deliver healthy warm homes at an affordable cost to consumers. And a lot of that is around the development of the virtual infrastructure and the integration to the network, and making sure that we've got a coordinated, planned approach that delivers efficiencies and is the most cost efficient way, and also coordinated and least disruptive way of delivering it for the customers. There are a growing number of other areas that are interested in this, and we're calling them fast follower communities, and they are being engaged with the project. And like I said, they will form part of the next steps to help us trial and demonstrate that it can be delivered in other areas. The SIF funding sits alongside other funding. So the Rosendale Valley Energy also have Pathfinder Places funding to look at the non-technical barriers, which is helping to complement the work that we're doing. And as an organisation, they're growing in capacity to be able to deliver this project. And from a standing start, they're now employing 6 people through their other projects in Rosendale who are working on this. So it's a real sort of growing project that's receiving a lot of local support as well as our support. And I think that was my last slide, and the next one leads us on to questions and answers. And like I said, Kate from Rosendale Valley Energy and Phil from Borough Happort here to help field questions. So thank you for your time.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Helen. A really fantastic project. Again, there are no questions in the Q&A. Audience, please feel free to pop any questions in there so that we can answer them at this point. But again, I have a few questions that we can start off with. It's really great to see how much care has gone into ensuring that consumers are able to engage with net zero by creating a path of least resistance for them in this project. I was just curious if you have any idea of the investor appetite for like raising debt on this model, particularly given it's a quite innovative and therefore unusual business model. And also curious if consumers have any feelings about this, or if for them they're just paying their bill and it doesn't really matter.
Kate, can I ask you to come on that, because I know you've been looking at those issues.
Yeah, thanks, Helen, and thanks for your question. Good morning, everyone. Yes, we're engaging. We have been engaging quite a lot with UK Infrastructure Bank, and they are really keen to support the work we're doing, as they are really interested in looking at new green infrastructure assets that can be deployed. So this is an infrastructure asset, the boreholes in the street, and actually the ability for that to scale means that there's quite a considerable amount of infrastructure that could be debt funded. I think the key around shared ground loop is it is quite a low risk infrastructure because it's not a centralised heat network, so it's not got central plant. So there's essentially it's just pipe work in the ground, and actually there's no moving parts because the heat pumps in the house actually drive the fluid through the system. So the pipe work's good for 80 to 120 years. The biggest risk is around technology evolution and what comes after heat pumps. But when you look at our history of central heating, we've had gas boilers for 50 years and there's not been huge amounts of evolution in that. And the other risk is obviously default on standing charge. So we have to make sure we've got enough diversity in the amount of people we have signed up for the system, and we've got to make sure that the system is affordable so we don't get the defaults on the standing charge.
That's great, thank you. And I love the use of the UK Infrastructure Bank because that's exactly what they're there for, to support these new innovations to come through. Another question I had was, Helen, you mentioned fast followers and how this solution can be deployed in other areas. Does that mean that when you say other areas, do you mean different building types and therefore potentially different types of consumers, whether they be maybe small commercial consumers or anything like that? Just curious to hear a bit more.
Yeah, I can answer that, but I will hand that one over to Kate because she's the one that's been drumming up the interest in other communities. So I'll pass that back over to Kate.
Yeah, thanks, Helen. Essentially, we're looking at this net zero terrace street model being a foundational model because we're looking at terrace houses as modular. But we think the model is agile enough to be to iterate to different types of communities with different types of architecture and different archetypes of homes as well. So it's less about moving on to businesses, it's more about iterating it for different community types and testing that with different communities as well. So adapting our building energy model and our techno-economic model for those different types of communities, and then testing in terms of engagement and the user profile and the energy demand as well. So we have, as Helen says, we've got a lot of interest across terrace communities, but also in other, rural villages. They're off the gas grid, they're on the gas grid. So we're talking to a lot of different communities about how this could apply to them.
Okay, that's really interesting. Thank you. I was just thinking about the high street in my hometown, which is an old place, but all of the shops are terraced, and so that was where my thinking was coming from. But it's really interesting to hear the broader views behind what your activity is. Okay, it doesn't look like there are any more questions. So in that case, I think we can move on to the break. Unfortunately, we've made up for time. So thank you for 3 projects that we just had. As it says there, we'll see you back at 11. Yeah, speak to you then. So thank you. So we've got 2 more projects left to present. I'll hand straight over to Guidelight, who will have 15 minutes to talk about the project, and then we'll have 10 minutes for the Q&A at the end. So over to you.
Fantastic, thank you very much. So hello everyone, my name is Charlie Barnes and I work for UK Power Networks. If you could go to the next slide, please. It just shows some of the partners who collaborate on this project. As you can see, there's quite a number, many of whom have joined us on this call, and some will be talking during this presentation, sharing the specific work they've done. If you could just go to the next slide, please. I'll give a little bit of background as to why Guidelight and what the aim is. So there's a critical need to decarbonise domestic heating. And due to that, there's a set target of 600,000 annual heat pump installations by 2028. So the UK government has recognised that there will be many homes that are complex to decarbonise due to a range of physical, financial and social factors impacting consumers. So they've made funding and supply chain support available. However, awareness of heat pumps and their benefits remains low, with a lack of information out there for consumers and a perception of high upfront and running costs, which deters a lot of them. So the aim of Guidelight is to transform how low carbon technologies are delivered to customers. And so we're developing an open access toolkit, which is designed to improve the uptake and optimize usage of heat pumps, especially amongst vulnerable consumers. So I'm actually going to pass straight over now to Elizabeth Edwards and Annette Lamley from the Centre for Sustainable Energy. So if you could go to the next slide, they can start talking about their work package.
Hi everyone, thanks so much, Charlie. If you could move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So one of the aims of Guidelight was to employ innovative social research methods to investigate and address the performance gap of retrofitted low carbon technologies through social and technical based interventions. So firstly, on our social research methods, the aim of our research was to explore the experience of households who are undergoing or who have recently undergone retrofit, especially to understand the reasons why retrofitted technologies like heat pumps don't always perform as expected once installed into households. And this is what we are calling the socio-technical performance gap. Our research was complemented by the University of Southampton's technical monitoring approach, which will be covered in the next few slides. Secondly, we aim to design a toolkit of socio-technical interventions with end users to support the uptake of low carbon technologies and help reduce the socio-technical performance gap in low income and vulnerable households. And our partners, SIA Partners, will talk more about the toolkit later in the presentation. If you could move to the next slide, please. So from our research directly with households in alpha phase, we were able to identify the following barriers and enablers to the uptake and use of low carbon technologies. So the barriers to uptake include the complexity of the application and pre-installation process, dwelling characteristics such as the size or location of the property, and the sharing of negative stories and concerns, which can often spread throughout communities. However, some of the enablers to uptake include funding availability, with technologies being free as a big attraction, personal social values, such as being sustainability driven, and seeing technologies in practice, for instance, visiting a friend or neighbour's property and drives for wider dwelling energy efficiency improvements and a want for the associated benefits. On the other side, barriers to participants being able to effectively use an LCT post-installation include limited handover information, linked to limited understanding of how the LCT works in practice, and challenges adapting household energy expectations or behaviours to the new technologies. Despite some of the challenges, participants have also discussed some of the benefits from installation to use. This includes positive installation experiences, despite this being a disruptive process, greater financial savings and opportunities, and improved comfort and cleaner technology. I'll now hand over to Annette to talk us through the personas.
Great, thank you. Next slide, please. Thanks. So Guidelight's intended to support all households through their heat pump journey, but particularly those who live in vulnerable circumstances and who might lack one or more of the smart energy capabilities that are necessary for them to be able to take full advantage of new low carbon technologies and associated services. So these could be things like digital skills and readiness, their values and social connections, their financial status, energy usage profile, or the physical characteristics of their home. And you can see some of these themes coming out of the research findings that Elizabeth has just described. So to help us to explore and to communicate how these characteristics might affect how customers engage with low carbon technologies, we've created a number of user personas, and you can see a very brief summary of these on this slide. So for each of these, we've developed a narrative that sets out what measures they will have installed under which funding scheme, the barriers that they come up against as a result of their vulnerabilities or their capabilities, and how the Guidelight toolkit might be deployed in each case to best support them and meet their different needs. So households are a key intended beneficiary of the Guidelight toolkit, but there are also a number of other potential users. So for example, local authorities and social housing providers have decarbonisation targets, but they can sometimes struggle with effective delivery due to lack of resources or specialist knowledge. So the toolkit would provide tailored resources, enabling local authorities to deliver targeted awareness and delivery campaigns, and to ensure high quality, standardised end-to-end retrofit journey. And this is especially relevant in the context of social housing, where retrofit schemes can sometimes feel like they're happening to residents rather than with them. We've also got community-based advice organisations and champions. So these work on the ground to provide trusted energy advice and support to vulnerable customers, and they can be particularly effective in reaching those who are in or who are at risk of fuel poverty and those who are digitally disengaged. So the toolkit would provide these groups with standardised and unbiased resources and training to broaden the range of support services that they can offer and ultimately help them to reach more customers. And I'll now pass over to Luke and Marge at the University of Southampton, who will talk about our approach to technical data analysis and monitoring. Thanks.
Thank you. So householders and other stakeholders need to have confidence that their heat pump is performing as it should do, and to counter those negative stories that were mentioned by CSE. So we move on to the next slide, please. So our role is to really look at that technical side of performance monitoring. That is the foundation of building that confidence. We initially looked at manufacturer data provided by partners in the project. So there's an example here from Portsmouth City Council that provided us with data from the manufacturers of the heat pumps in 5 properties. And these are all pretty much identical properties with similar occupancy and makeup. But we found that the patterns of usage were very, very different between them, and the data itself was a very sort of variable quality, and it was difficult to infer an awful lot from the data. As an example of that, if we move on to the next slide. So we've got a graph here with outside temperature on the left-hand side, which is the line. So you see it varies from about 11 to down to 0 degrees over this period. And the performance of the heat pump, which is basically the amount of heat you get out divided by the electricity put in, are the points on this graph. And for a typical normal air source heat pump, you would expect values in the range of 3 to 4, whereas for these properties over this period and also since then, the performance as reported by the heat pump itself is much lower. So we're trying to understand why this is the case. And the conclusion we came to was essentially that we needed our own independent, high-resolution monitoring to really understand how the usage and performance of these heat pump systems are really occurring. So if we just move to the next slide. So in order to get that high resolution information, we did a case study of a heat pump in Southampton where we put a lot of monitoring on it in terms of temperature, indoor environment, and power consumption down to the sort of 10-second resolution. And this is ongoing data. So this was really to provide a much more detailed picture than we got from the data that we received from the data from the other partners. There's some images of the different monitoring here. So if we move to the next slide. So this is some of the data that we've got, and we're sort of progressively zooming in here on sort of finer and finer time intervals. So A and B over a course of days. A shows some temperatures and B shows power consumption, and the pink trace is the heat pump power consumption. C is sort of zooming in over a day, and then D and E are going down to the kind of minute resolution. And you can see this heat pump is cycling very rapidly. Now, this is not something that would necessarily show up in the daily COP data from the manufacturer, but it does indicate that there's an issue here because it shouldn't be cycling this fast, and this may cause sort of premature wear and problems later on with the heat pump. And part of the point of the monitoring approach is to sort of preemptively highlight issues and report them in a kind of easily understandable way. Okay, so if we move on to the next slide. So this is just a summary. So there's a lot of text here. I won't read out everything it says, but highlight the key points. So we found that the data availability and quality from different manufacturers of heat pumps is very patchy, and it's actually decreasing over time. Connectivity is a big issue for housing providers, so the kit should be able to run in a standalone mode. And the most difficult and expensive part of monitoring is the flow monitoring. We did some experiments on that, and so the cost optimization is very important. So thank you very much. I'll hand over now to Payal from SIA Partners to talk about the process flows.
Thanks, Luke. So we've heard about the findings from both the social and the technical research. So we want to tie this together now into a commercially viable solution. So if we go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So given that Guidelight will serve to help several stakeholders across the retrofit lifecycle, it was key for us to understand exactly what their needs were to inform the solution design of the toolkit. So the 9 stakeholder groups that you see here, we engaged with during one-to-one sessions during our alpha phase. So to pick out some of the needs of some of these stakeholders, if we take regulators, for example, we found that they have a clear need to increase their heat pump adoption, which currently is far behind national targets. And so, of course, Guidelight will support the supply chain to improve the adoption of this technology. If we consider energy suppliers, there is a key need to drive the uptake of the heat pump products, such as time of use tariffs or heating flexibility. And so Guidelight could help to provide a white labeled version of our platform to suppliers. Similarly, for heat pump manufacturers, we found that there was a clear need for them to improve consumer trust and confidence in their technology. And so Guidelight will be able to provide clear and easily digestible information to consumers. If we could go to the next slide, please. Okay, so what is Guidelight then? So Guidelight is an open access toolkit that will specifically target the improved uptake and effective use of heat pumps for vulnerable customers. It aims to transform how we provide low carbon technologies to vulnerable customers, recognizing that some will have additional needs that must be considered to ensure that they receive the benefits from these valuable technologies. So our toolkit will be available via an online platform, but will be containing a range of resources and services that are available both online and offline. So this includes in-person support that is available to those who are digitally disengaged, personalized and location-based guidance, so customers know exactly what support, what services, what schemes are available to them in their area. They will be provided with a tailored retrofit end-to-end journey to minimize disruption. They'll be provided with physical heat pump monitoring devices that provide a real-time feedback on asset performance and drive optimization. And finally, aftercare services to ensure a high quality of services delivered. On the right-hand side, you can see a comprehensive list of all the different elements of our Guidelight toolkit. If we could go to the next slide, please. Okay, so how will Guidelight work? So the current process for preparing, installing and using a heat pump has countless opportunities for drop-off. So on the left-hand side here, we can see the current process for a customer to obtain a heat pump. This has been split into 4 stages, which are shown on the right-hand side, and all the key problems that a vulnerable customer could face. Yep. And so, for example, at the awareness stage, a customer could find that it's difficult for them to find reliable information on heat pumps. At the preparation stage, they could find that it is difficult to find a trusted certified installer. At the installation stage, the installer themselves could lack the time or resources to provide an extensive demonstration of the technology. And finally, at the aftercare stage, it could be found that the operation of the technology itself is too complex, leading the customer to disengage. So Guidelight's toolkit will be able to provide a solution to many of these problems and significantly improve the way in which vulnerable customers access and use these technologies to ensure maximal benefit and ensure that they are not left behind in the energy transition. And that's it from us. Thanks.
Great, amazing, thank you. Perfect timing. We've got a question in the chat. So Anonymous has asked, how did you ensure your monitoring system was usable for heat pumps from different OEMs?
Luke, you want to answer it?
Sure. The monitoring system we use with components from the Open Energy Monitor system, yeah, the flow monitoring aspect is the interesting bit because that depends on whether it's a retrofit application or a new build application, as to whether you choose to go for an inline heat meter or something else like an ultrasonic. But otherwise, all the components are external to the system and therefore can be applied to different air source heat pump systems.
Great, thank you. A question that I had was, do you have plans to look at other technologies other than heat pumps? Because obviously heat pumps are one solution in a suite of potential retrofit technologies that vulnerable consumers could use to support the transition to net zero.
Do you want me to add it? So at the beginning of the project, we started looking at all other low carbon technologies like battery and solar panels. So what we have done, a part of the work with the 5 households we've been monitoring, we've been getting the data from Portsmouth City Council. We looked at the data from the installations from their battery and the solar panels, and is in our report that we submitted to the project lead that we told that people are not getting any benefit of those installations because they don't know how to get the benefit out of it. They're not signed up to the flexibility tariffs. And this is a really serious blocker of that people don't have enough knowledge how to use them. And we have reported that. And I think in the future, any going ahead with the project will include the other low carbon technologies like solar panels and batteries to get the maximum benefit of the heat pumps or heating, decarbonizing the heating. Thanks.
That makes a lot of sense because, I mean, at the start of the presentation, a number of the barriers that were listed are applicable not just to heat pumps, but to the other solutions that you mentioned. So it would be good to understand how those can be supported to deploy as well. It doesn't look like we have any more questions. So I will just say thank you very much to the Guidelight team, and we can move on to the final project of the morning, Shield. So I'll hand over to Shield now.
Morning. Next slide, please. Hi, yes. Yeah, good morning. My name is Nikolai Hooting. I'm the Innovation Project Lead for Shield at UK Power Networks. We'll go to the next slide and get a quick overview of what we would like to cover today. Yeah, so I'll give a quick introduction of all the partners that were involved in Shield and the ones that are on the call today. And then we're going through, the problem that Shield is trying to solve, give a quick project overview, and then really share all of our alpha findings with you. And then at the end, yeah, we look at the beta phase plans for Shield. So yeah, if we could go to the next slide, please. Yeah, so as we've heard today, enabling the just energy transition is not really a trivial problem that rests on one sort of technical solution. To find the best solution, we need to bring together a wide range of partners, as most projects today. They're quite large consortiums. So yeah, UK Power Networks has partnered with 8 organizations for Shield, each really bringing an important piece to the puzzle. So Power Circle is really the driving force behind the Shield development, and they developed the Shield proposition and are really shaping the future vision. I've got John Cape on the call with us today, who will share with you what we've done and achieved during Alpha phase. We've got Community Works, UK Community Works, who were able to draw on their extensive experience in community engagement to make sure that the Shield proposition is really user-centric by design. And Alex Templeton will share the outputs from this user engagement work during Alpha phase. So on the call are also Martin Lord from Citizens Advice, who are an independent trusted advisor and really are uniquely positioned to support vulnerable customers, and their input was incredibly valuable for us in Alpha phase and will be for Beta phase as well. And lastly, we've got Travis Thurn joining us from Thermify, who with their heat hub are providing really key piece of innovative technology that solves the issue of providing space heating at significantly reduced costs to Shield households. So both Martin and Travis will be on hand to answer questions during the Q&A part. But now I'll hand over to Alex, who will remind us of the problem that Shield is trying to address.
Thanks, Nikolai. Next slide, please. So we have several interlocking problems. Firstly, energy costs are rising and high. We're retrofitting homes too slowly to meet the 2050 targets. And much of the retrofit is focused on fabric first, which is expensive. Deep retrofits are costing somewhere between £20,000 and £60,000 and often quite slow. And as a result, we are struggling to finance and deliver retrofit at scale. And one of the key challenges we've found as we've been doing this work is a very large proportion of the households that we are talking with do not have the capital available to retrofit their own homes. So because retrofit approaches are so expensive, in the social housing sector, they're very reliant on grants and government funding schemes. And in the private sector, the bottom 80% of households do not have enough capital to invest. So our inability to retrofit homes fast leaves many of the poorest and most vulnerable households very exposed to rising energy costs. And to speed up delivery, we need both new technologies that reduce costs and new business models and ways of financing their deployment. And this is what the Shield project has been focusing on. John?
Next slide, please. So we have 2 areas of innovation, and the first on technical innovation. At the heart of that is a new heating system, the Thermify Heat Hub. It uses heat which would otherwise be wasted from data processing. Data centers are a massive and burgeoning sector of the economy, and what this does is have a miniaturized data center that can be in each home. And that delivers data services to customers anywhere in the world through the internet. But what it is able to do is use that waste heat to give a very low cost and standardized cost with no volumetric charge to the householder. Alongside that, there is innovation in various kinds of heat storage, which we have been examining in Alpha. And whilst PV and batteries are fairly familiar technology, the key innovation we're looking to with batteries is using household level batteries at scale to deliver grid services to electricity system operators and to earn project revenue, helping to keep the costs down to the customer. On the business model side, that's equally important. We've heard of many, many barriers through each of the projects that have been presenting, and we address those barriers through a social ESCO, which provides the ability to develop, install, operate and structure funding on scale up for these kinds of projects, aggregating them to secure patient low-cost long-term finance from institutional funders, and also to provide the scale that enables things like grid services to be effectively provided. And the social enterprise structure is what gives trust, to be blunt, that people won't be ripped off. We're there to give a fair return to each stakeholder. Next slide, please. So during Alpha, we've been developing the solution in great detail, both the technical design and the commercial design, the contract suite that underpins it all. We've engaged tenants significantly and engaged housing associations. We now have housing associations who have formally expressed interest in participating in beta with a combined stock of over 100,000 homes. So that really demonstrates the ability and appetite amongst social landlords to take this to scale with us. We've modelled all the benefits and undertaken 30 site surveys to give us confidence in how we can actually approach more deployment at scale in beta. We have actually deployed the PV and battery side of Shield in 2 homes, and that's meant the tenants have been taken through and have entered their energy supply contracts. So there is actual ESCO-based energy supply into 2 homes. The thermified side has been subject to a bit of technical delay and is due to be installed shortly in those 2 homes. And we're monitoring and evaluating as from now. Next slide, please. So we found very substantial benefits. I think this is a distinctive project in actually being able to deal with the underlying problem of high energy costs, providing significantly lower energy costs for households. So the heat and hot water is provided if you're in fuel poverty for £5 per month, and that's flat rate with no additional volumetric charge. That is revolutionary for low-income households struggling with their heating and in many cases dangerously underheating. If they're not in fuel poverty, it's a little higher, £30 a month, still an extremely large saving, and a fixed cost of 16 pence per kilowatt hour for electricity generated and used on site. Again, a very big saving over the standard electricity costs. And all of those are based on our scale up modeling. They're based on what is realistic when we go to commercial scale. And all that leads to 20 to 40% savings for tenants. In some cases, we found a lot higher than that. And the whole system is simple to use with interfaces for the household, which are easy for them to operate. Next slide, please. Grid services. Big benefits in terms of UKPN as the DNO, due to our flexibility services being able to even out the ups and downs of electrified heating. large reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, both for the heating solution and the power solution, but also data service provisioning having major greenhouse gas emission reduction as against conventional data centers. Big benefits for social landlords, and in due course we aim to extend to household private low-income homeowners and private landlords, and data center users getting large benefits too. Next slide, please, and I think I'll hand over to Alex.
Thanks, John. So a key thread that's been running through SHIELD is doing things with people and not to them, which is one of the big frustrations that so many have with the low carbon transition. So throughout SHIELD, we've sought to understand how concerned tenants were about energy costs and climate change, and how willing they are to try new technologies and services in response to their concerns. So we initially surveyed 10,000 tenants. We had about 500 responses. And we found that tenants are extremely concerned about energy costs and climate change, and about 95% of them were willing to try the SHIELD system, and only about 1 in 20 have no interest. So in Alpha, Citizens Advice Essex held 73 in-depth one-to-one interviews with tenants about the SHIELD system. And of these, 59 signed up for a trial in the next phase. And including other households in fuel poverty we engaged with, we've got about 74 households already signed up for a potential beta trial. Tenant concerns centered around about 5 key things. Firstly, digital interfaces and control interfaces. Many of the tenants are very uncomfortable with technology and wanted reassurance on how easy they would be to use. They also wanted to be shown how to use technology. They didn't want to be left struggling on their own with novel equipment. They were concerned about comfort levels. Would they be the same? They were also very interested in who tested new technologies and how they're tested. And there were also general concerns around maintenance and technical support. So this was all considered prior to alpha phase, but it all needs to be turned into a support system that customers are comfortable with. I think our conclusion is that there's strong interest in and demand for cost-cutting low-carbon systems in general, and the SHIELD system in particular, when it was explained in depth to potential households. So we don't anticipate any problems in recruiting the numbers of households necessary to conduct a full-scale beta trial. Next slide, please, and back to John.
I think Nikolai, were you going
yes.
to do this, or am I?
Sorry.
Yes, yeah, I'm happy to take this. Thanks, Alex. Yeah, so we're really excited for the beta phase. So, you know, the main aim is to create a really robust evidence base for the social ESCO model. And we're really doing that by aiming to retrofit 300 homes. And that number is really required to have a large enough capacity to participate in these grid services that we're targeting. So it will be a phased rollout over multiple years, and ultimately we want to gather data over 3 winter heating periods to draw meaningful conclusions of the performance of the SHIELD offering. So as Alex said, we've got 74 confirmed signups, and as John mentioned, we've got a potential pool of over 100,000 homes. And what that really gives us in beta phase is really the ability to test the suitability of SHIELD on a diverse range of households. So, for example, that could be to demonstrate how SHIELD supports those that are already in fuel poverty or are at risk of going into fuel poverty. Also, as Alex mentioned on the digital inclusion element, is we will pick households that have got lower digital skills, and we can test how well the solution currently works, and also some of the changes that we will make to it during beta to make it more accessible. And from a technical perspective, having different types of properties is quite powerful as well. What does the ideal SHIELD house look like in terms of insulation, etc., and what are the system's limitations, and where do we still need to do some more work? And really, to support that rollout, a lot of work is planned to run in parallel. So there's an element of optimizing the revenues generated from offering these grid services. We're also aiming to participate in a peer-to-peer energy market. And then, yeah, ultimately, we would like, from a DNO perspective, we'd like to use the real world data for really detailed impact assessment from a grid perspective. So that's looking at the reinforcement required versus the impact of these behind the meter assets on our ability to use flexibility. And then here on the slide, we've got some of these specific challenges that we started to address in alpha, and yeah, will need to be addressed early in beta. One of them is really getting the approval of the Thermify heat hub to be included in the SAP Appendix Q, and that's really crucial for our social landlords to have the to be the knowledge that deploying the Shield solution doesn't negatively impact the SAP rating of their properties. If anything, it improves the SAP rating, which is obviously important for them across their portfolio. And we're also looking at different heat storage options, and that market is moving really fast, and we're aiming to have different heat storage options for different types of properties, and we will test a few of those in beta phase. So I think that's all from us. Thank you very much for listening, and yes, any questions, happy to take them.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Shield team. It looks like we've got a few questions, which is great. The first one is, which regions did you look at, and which regions are you planning to look at in the next phase? I think that's for you, John.
Yeah, should I answer that? So we are focusing in alpha phase in Essex. Essex County Council is a key partner, but in beta, whilst we will be continuing to work very much in Essex, we've broadened the base, and these housing associations that Nikolai has referenced are around the Midlands and the southeast of England, but some of them also have national coverage as well. Our aim at scale up is UK wide, and in beta phase, it would be mainly Midlands and the southeast.
Great, thank you very much. The next question is from Aileen. So has Shield been able to ensure that all the customers that are being approached are vulnerable? Has the project clearly identified vulnerable customers? For example, who falls into the category of vulnerable customers? This could include the elderly, disabled individuals, and those with specific medical needs, or those in rural, isolated areas.
I mean, it's designed for low-income households, and all are vulnerable in that sense, but there are these other vulnerabilities. Alex, do you want to follow up on that?
Yes. So because of the complexities of engaging with tenants, they were self-selecting in who responded. Some of the tenant customers are vulnerable and some weren't. And we recognised that there was we had a spread. So one of the things that Citizens Advice did was to harvest households that were approached them that were in fuel poverty, and Citizens Advice ran a survey on them, and we recruited a number from that pool of households to definitely participate in the beta phase.
I'll just add, during beta, we've got work packages to improve accessibility to a range of vulnerable groups. So we'll be extending the accessibility, and particularly to approach the issue of informed consent. That there are many vulnerable customers for whom informed consent isn't something you can just take from providing, here's a standard bit of information. You have to present things in new and different ways.
That's great to hear, because it can be easy to fall into the trap of vulnerable customers fit in one group, but actually, as Aileen's mentioned and you've touched on, they have different needs and challenges. The next question is about the commercial innovation. It feels like there is the potential for the Shield model to shift to delivering hot water as a service. Is this a business model that you'd eventually consider, given consumers' concerns around operating and maintenance of the system?
Well, it is actually part of the Shield proposition of heat and hot water as a service. And the key thing is that it would be provided with a very low standing charge and no volumetric charge, which means that what we've seen evidence of in many parts of the country is people underheating their homes quite dangerously, often 10, 11 degrees in the winter, simply because they can't afford that. And that disappears as a threat because there's no volumetric charge. From a data processing point of view, the data processing follows the heat load, and it will therefore people will be able to just provide the heating that they need through simple controls that just set the temperature that they require.
Great, thank you. The next question is about funders. So what kind of funders are you engaging, particularly given that Shield is focusing on social enterprises and the need to ensure trust from their consumers?
So it's a mix. There are social impact funders, but volume social impact funders, but also the institutional finance world. And through a sister project, Essex County Council is leading on through Pathfinder Places. I'm leading the finance work stream on that. And we're engaging through an organisation called Pensions for Purpose with a wide range of institutional funders who, I don't know, there's this catchphrase about place-based impact investment, and that's the, those that have got an appetite for that kind of engagement that we're in dialogue with.
Okay, great, thank you. The next question is about the Shield Centre, the Shield system, which feels like mini CHP. What will the installation of the mini data centre look like? What's the physical footprint of the system? And will there be the potential to include other tech that may not be in the data centre but produce waste heat, such as TVs or dryers?
Travis, do you want to follow up on that?
Absolutely. So the mini data center currently is about 3/4 of a cubic meter in size, so roughly comparable to an air source heat pump. However, it can go inside of the house and is nearly silent. It's about as loud as your current boiler is. As for other technology that may not be in the data center, that's not in our offering, whether it fits into Shield in general. I'll let John speak to that. We haven't investigated any alternative electronic sources of heat, mostly due to the fact that it is not sufficient. Dryers would come close, but most households don't have dryers in them. So we're able to bring the solution of the data center into the home to provide heat, and we deal with the data center side of it.
Yeah, just coming back, I think there's probably most scope where we're applying this to new build, which we won't be doing in build in beta, but there is good scope for heat recovery from sewage systems, for example. But if you're designing this into new build, you've got a lot more scope to be imaginative in that area, and we'd be keen to do that.
Great, thank you. So the next question is, we talked about how many customers who are vulnerable may not be particularly tech literate. How will the system interface be accessible for those homes?
I mean, at the moment, the interface is via an on-wall display. For those who may be familiar with Switchy, we've used Switchy as the interface device, or through an app. One of our modules in beta is to be able to produce a tablet-sized interface, which will be more readily available for some. But we recognise that electronic interface isn't suitable for everybody either. So we'll be looking in beta at the range of ways. I think the important thing is that the system is automated very highly, so that people don't need to interface too much. What they need to do one-off when they switch to an optimized supply is let us know what new tariff they're on, and we can set the parameters according to that tariff. And aside from that, it's really just what they would do with a current gas boiler, i.e. say, when they want their heating and what temperature they want it to be.
Okay, thank you. Another question from Aileen. In terms of data protection, have you had any barriers and how do you intend to overcome them if you are applying for beta?
Oh, Alex, do you want to come on to that?
Yes. We've had a lot of challenges with data protection. We've got 3 strategies in beta to address that. The first is we build our own databases using outbound post in a traditional fashion, which means that we have a direct relationship with the customer and there isn't the challenge of dealing with a tenant through a housing association. The second is working with Citizens Advice Bureau across the country. They have a number of fuel poor and people in energy distress contacting them, and we can sort of enter into a discussion with these people through that channel. And a third strategy that we've discussed with other housing associations is instead of doing this with the tenant, is to install systems in houses that are void and have no tenants in them, and then educate the new tenant into the new system.
Thank you. That's really interesting. And then the final question is, what are the minimum requirements for a household communications connection to have the data center?
That's going to be, yep, happy to take that one. It's actually quite simple. We bring our own data connection, so there are no requirements for the householder to have any data connection whatsoever.
Okay, so everything existing is kind of,
Yep.
mental.
So part of the method of delivering this is Thermify pays for our own electricity and we pay for our own data connection that are not part of it. So Shield doesn't pay for Thermify's heat or electricity. The householder doesn't pay for Thermify's electricity. We bring our own electricity and we bring our own data.
Okay, that's really interesting. And a great place to leave it. So thank you very much, Shield team. And I think it's just now for me to wrap up this session. So yeah, thanks, Amy. This is actually our last show and tell webinar. So for those of you who've joined us on previous days, we hope you've enjoyed. Oh no, sorry, it's not the last one. There's one more this afternoon, transitioning local energy systems. So hopefully see you there. But yeah, we hope you've enjoyed all of the other ones. It has been a great selection of different projects and different themes that we've been able to look at over the Round 2 Alpha projects. So if you are interested in finding out more about particular projects or SIF in general, there is a huge amount of great stuff going on. And as a result, there are a number of different ways in which you can engage with us. So as you can see there, some of them are standard, such as the website or signing up for a newsletter. We also have some interesting and slightly different ways of hearing more about what we're doing, such as the Bright Spark podcast. So hopefully we will be hearing from you, or you'll be hearing from us via one of these channels. And that's it. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you to all of those who presented. It has been a great way to spend the morning. And yeah, if that's it, have a great rest of the day, everyone.